You're waiting for the feeling to come, the signal, the clarity, the courage, but it won't come, not in the way you think. Because readiness doesn't arrive before the journey begins. It's not a door that opens. It's a path that forms only when your feet start moving. The truth? You don't become the person you dream to be by dreaming harder. You become them by acting, awkwardly, imperfectly, again and again. Every choice you make is a vote for your future identity. So cast the vote today. Walk like them, think like them, show up like them. Don't wait to feel ready. That's how people stay stuck. You're not here to stay stuck. You're here to remember who you could be and begin living like it. Chapter 1. Stop waiting. Start becoming. Most people live in pause mode, as if life has a remote control they've misplaced. They wait for the perfect feeling, the perfect mood, the perfect day. But that moment rarely arrives. Transformation doesn't wait for a signal. It responds to movement. Becoming isn't something you stumble into. It's something you step into, even while unsure, even while scared. The door doesn't open when you feel ready. It opens when you knock consistently enough. Imagine a man staring at a mountain, wondering what it feels like to be at the top. He reads books, watches documentaries, listens to climbers talk, but he never takes the first step. He's waiting for strength to show up before the climb, not knowing the climb builds the strength. Your journey is not about being fully prepared at the start. It's about being committed enough to learn along the way. Clarity isn't a prerequisite, it's a reward. Every morning you delay the process of becoming who you're meant to be. You train your mind to hesitate, and hesitation grows roots. But action, no matter how small, weakens those roots. One deep breath followed by one honest effort. That's how new identities begin. Not with grand gestures, but with quiet decisions repeated daily. You don't become powerful all at once. You become someone who keeps showing up, especially when it's easiest not to. Think of someone who changed your life. They likely didn't enter with a lightning strike. It was their consistency, their presence, their quiet power over time. Becoming that person for yourself is the highest form of growth. Not chasing inspiration, but becoming the source of it. The world shifts for people who walk instead of waiting for the wind to push them. It's not about speed, it's about sincerity. There's a gentle courage in beginning without answers, starting when the map is blurry. Many of the most fulfilled people once walked through doubt with nothing but inner trust. It's not magic, it's discipline wrapped in faith. It's showing up before the world validates your steps, before applause, before proof. And when you do that long enough, the world begins to reflect back what you believed quietly in yourself all along. Waiting gives the illusion of control, but it robs you of growth. There's wisdom in stillness, yes, but not in indefinite delay. The right moment isn't found, it's created. Through decisions you're scared to make, conversations you're nervous to have, dreams you're unsure you deserve. But deserving isn't a feeling, it's a result of persistence. You earn the life you envision by becoming someone who acts before they feel worthy. There was once a woman who wanted to write, but she feared her words weren't enough. One day she wrote anyway, just one paragraph, then another. Years later, her work changed lives. But the real victory wasn't the books, it was who she became in the process. She stopped waiting to feel like a writer. She started writing and became one. The action wasn't grand, but it was honest, and honesty builds momentum. The moment you begin, truly begin, is the moment life starts responding differently. People notice, opportunities move. Confidence grows not from waiting for it, but from becoming someone who chooses anyway. Even if your hands shake, even if your voice cracks, The path you want isn't waiting for you to feel strong. It's waiting for you to begin walking. Becoming starts the second you stop waiting for permission. Chapter 2. Act like the person, not the problem. There comes a time when you must decide who's holding the pen, your potential or your pain. When you constantly rehearse the problem, you become a mirror of it. You reflect what hurt you, what broke you, what delayed you. But when you begin to act like the person you're growing into, not the one life tried to reduce you to, you reclaim authorship. Your identity is a living story, not a fixed label stamped by past events. A man once defined himself by his anger. Years of betrayal hardened his words, shaped his posture. But one day he looked into the eyes of his young son and saw the same sharpness forming. That moment woke something up. He decided to speak softer, breathe deeper, respond slower. Not because he suddenly stopped feeling angry, but because he no longer wanted to pass the problem on. He began acting like the man he wished his father had been. Too often, we let our environment dictate our behavior. If things go wrong, we mirror the chaos. If we're disrespected, we respond in kind. But leadership, real inner leadership, means rising above the echo. It's choosing to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the tone. You act not from emotion, but from intention. Not from what's happening around you, but from who you've chosen to be despite it. Pain has a way of branding your self-image. You start seeing yourself through the lens of what went wrong. I'm anxious. I'm broken. I'm not enough. These thoughts aren't truths, they're symptoms. Temporary conditions, not permanent identities. When you act like the healed version of you, even while still hurting, you begin loosening the grip of those false definitions. That's not pretending, that's becoming. There's quiet power in practicing behaviors before they feel natural. Confidence isn't a personality trait, it's a behavior practiced consistently. You don't wait to feel brave to speak your mind with kindness. You do it scared. You don't wait to feel whole before making healthy choices. You choose them in fragments. The actions of the person you want to be are the very bridge to becoming that person. Movement first, mindset follows. One of the most liberating decisions you can make is to stop rehearsing your pain in conversations, in thoughts, in inner monologues. It's not denial, it's discipline. The moment you stop reacting as the problem and start responding as the healed, everything shifts, not instantly, but steadily. Your relationships shift, your self-respect deepens. You start commanding space without needing to explain yourself. Think of a person who exudes calm in chaos. They're not calm because life is gentle to them. They're calm because they've learned to act like peace even when they're trembling inside. They trained their nervous system by repetition, not by comfort. When you practice patience in a storm, you don't erase the storm, but you prove it doesn't control you. That's a different kind of freedom. That's earned stillness. The problem version of you might want to lash out, procrastinate, withdraw, or sabotage. But you don't have to answer every emotional invitation. Let silence answer your triggers. Let stillness handle the noise. When you pause before reacting, you're not avoiding life. You're mastering it. You're making space between the problem and the person you're becoming. And that space is where power lives. There's an art to acting ahead of your healing. It's not fake. It's faith in motion. It's the subtle defiance of saying, I know what I've been through, but that's not all I am. It's brushing your teeth when depressed. It's applying for the job you're not sure you deserve. It's saying, I forgive you before your ego is ready. These aren't acts of weakness. They're signs of a soul stepping out of the shadows and into alignment. So when you feel low, ask, what would the strong version of me do right now? When you feel triggered, ask, how would the centered version of me respond? Begin to act like that person in small, consistent ways. Over time, the line between performance and identity fades. You're no longer pretending, you're evolving, and the world doesn't just notice who you're becoming. It adjusts to it. Chapter 3. Identity is a choice, not a discovery. We often treat identity like buried treasure, something hidden deep within, waiting to be unearthed. But what if it's more like a sculpture than a secret? Something you shape with every thought, every action, every decision. You don't find yourself by waiting. You build yourself by choosing who to be day by day. Identity isn't about discovery. It's about deliberate creation. Think of a person who transformed their life, not because they suddenly figured out who they were, but because they got tired of being someone they no longer respected. That moment of quiet frustration can be powerful. It's the moment you stop asking, "Who am I?" and start declaring, "This is who I'm becoming." That shift in language is where freedom begins. The world will try to define you by your past, by what you've done, by what you've survived, but none of those things are you. They're just chapters. You are the author, not the summary. Choosing your identity means writing new pages even while others keep rereading your old ones. Let them. You've got better things to do, like becoming. There's a subtle trap in endlessly searching for the real you. That search can turn into a loop of overthinking and underliving. True identity reveals itself through action, not introspection alone. You don't think your way into a new identity, you live your way into it. Each choice you make is a vote for the person you want to be. Imagine someone who wants to be seen as disciplined. They don't need to feel disciplined to start. They need to wake up early once, then again and again. Over time, those actions build proof, and that proof builds belief. That belief solidifies into identity, not overnight, but inevitably. You shape who you are by what you repeatedly do, not by how inspired you feel. Sometimes we wait for a label to match how we feel inside, but the labels come after the action. You don't wait to feel like an athlete to start training. You train, and eventually the identity catches up. The same goes for being kind, brave, grounded, or wise. These aren't innate titles. They're earned reflections of consistent behavior. There was a girl who used to call herself a failure because she dropped out of college. But years later, she built a business, helped others, and found a deeper calling. She realized she didn't need a degree to define her. She needed alignment. She stopped looking at her past decisions as definitions and started using them as direction. That pivot changed everything. Choosing an identity doesn't mean denying who you've been. It means evolving from it. You can carry the lessons without carrying the weight. Every version of you has served a purpose, but not every version deserves a permanent place. Some were built for survival, others for comfort. But the one you choose now, that one's built for growth. Even pain can become part of a chosen identity, not as a wound, but as a source of compassion. The person who suffered deeply often becomes the one who heals others. But that's only possible when they choose to rise, not just relive. Your scars are not your story. They're your strength in disguise, waiting to be rewritten through purpose. One of the most empowering truths is that you can wake up any day and decide to be someone new, not to pretend, but to align, to stop acting in ways that betray your higher self, to start living in ways that support who you're becoming. That decision is not a moment of revelation, it's a daily practice of intention. Identity can feel fixed because people around you expect consistency, but consistency is not the same as truth. You owe no one the version of you they met 5 years ago, or even 5 months ago. You are allowed to grow, allowed to shift, allowed to change direction mid-sentence. The world may resist, but evolution is not about permission. It's about courage. The moment you choose a new identity, expect discomfort. You'll be tempted to retreat, to relapse into what's familiar. That's not failure. It's friction. It's the tension that comes from replacing old habits with higher ones. Stay with it. The discomfort is proof that you're choosing differently, and that choice is the seed of transformation. Choosing your identity means choosing your standards, what you tolerate, what you prioritize, what you believe you deserve. The person you aim to become is shaped by what you say yes to, and even more by what you say no to. Boundaries aren't walls, they're blueprints. They protect the person you're constructing. You don't need a complete vision of who you want to be to begin. You just need the next clue, the next right action. Identity doesn't arrive fully formed. It reveals itself through small commitments honored over time. Begin where you are. Choose who you want to be today. Let the next version unfold, not through pressure, but through practice. So when someone says, just be yourself, ask a better question. Which self am I choosing to be? The one shaped by fear, or the one led by vision? The one written by default, or the one crafted with intention? The self you choose repeatedly becomes the self the world will come to know. And most importantly, the self you'll come to trust. Chapter 4. Become before you believe. Belief is powerful, but it's not the beginning. Most people wait to believe in themselves before they act, but the truth is the opposite. Belief often arrives after action. Confidence grows when you've earned your own trust, and trust is earned by doing what scares you, especially when you don't feel ready. Becoming isn't a reward for belief, it's the path that leads to it. There was a young man who doubted his voice. He had stories to tell, but never spoke them aloud. One day, he recorded himself speaking a short paragraph and deleted it right after. But the next day, he did it again. And this time, he saved it. Eventually, others began to listen. But more importantly, he began to believe. Not because the world said he could, but because he did, repeatedly, even when unsure. We tend to think belief must be complete before progress begins. But belief is built like a staircase, not found like a switch. You don't start at the top. You take one step, then another. Your legs may shake, your voice may quiver, but the climb builds the capability. Each moment you move forward without certainty, you lay another stone beneath your future belief. Too often we confuse self-belief with self-permission. We wait for some inner yes before we dare to act. But most growth begins with a quiet rebellion against our doubts. You don't wait for permission from your fear. You act while it still whispers. You become the person your belief will eventually catch up to. That's how transformation works. Forward motion first, faith later. When you start becoming someone you've never been, you will not feel like that person yet. That's normal. A caterpillar doesn't feel like a butterfly. It becomes one through process, not permission. You don't have to feel strong to begin lifting. You don't have to feel confident to speak up. You don't have to believe fully to behave intentionally. The behavior builds the belief. There's a quiet kind of courage in practicing things you don't feel worthy of yet. Writing even if you don't feel like a writer. Leading even if you don't see yourself as a leader. Becoming before believing means trusting that identity can be shaped, not just inherited. It means building your own evidence, one honest effort at a time. A woman once started waking up at 5 a.m. to reclaim her mornings. At first, she didn't feel like a disciplined person. She didn't believe she could keep it up. But after a few weeks, her life began to change, not because she believed in herself, but because she kept showing up. And eventually, her actions created a new story. Her belief wasn't the spark, her effort was. Your mind needs proof to rewrite its patterns, And that proof is created through repetition, not loud, dramatic change, but small, steady consistency. When you act like someone who believes, your brain starts to shift. It begins to say, maybe we are that kind of person after all. And with time, the actions carve out a new identity. Belief feels solid only after the foundation is laid through action. Think of a tree. Its roots grow in darkness beneath the surface. No one sees them, yet they make everything above possible. Your daily efforts, the ones no one applauds, the ones you're not even sure matter, are your roots. And one day, your belief will bloom from that unseen labor. It's tempting to wait for clarity before committing, but the clearest vision often comes after you've started moving. The fog doesn't lift while you're sitting still. It clears as you walk forward. The more you act, the more you see. The more you become, the more your future belief will have something real to stand on. Inaction preserves doubt. Movement makes space for belief. We fear becoming someone we don't believe in yet because we associate that with being fake. But there's nothing fake about effort. Pretending is lying to others. Becoming is showing up for yourself before the world confirms it. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You just need to practice showing up as the version of you that aligns with your next chapter. Sometimes belief comes in pieces. A moment of courage here, a decision honored there. You don't need to fully believe to begin. You just need to want it enough to move anyway. Each time you act, you collect proof, and those pieces stack up into something stronger than blind faith. They become lived experience. The problem with waiting to believe is that belief can't exist in a vacuum. It needs evidence. And if you're not moving, there's nothing for belief to grow on. It's like expecting a fire without striking a match. Becoming is the strike, the spark, the commitment. Belief is the warmth that follows. Think of the person you admire most. They weren't born with unshakable belief. They simply refused to stop becoming. Even when doubt whispered, even when fear screamed, they moved anyway. They built belief the hard way, not by sitting still and visualizing, but by standing up and doing the uncomfortable work repeatedly. So when you feel the urge to wait until you feel ready, remember this. Becoming leads. Belief follows. You don't need to trust yourself completely to start. You just need to show up today as someone willing to try. Because every step forward, even small, makes belief more possible. And one day, you'll look back and realize you believed all along. You just didn't have the words for it yet. Chapter 5. The confidence you want is earned in action. Confidence isn't handed out, it's earned. It doesn't arrive as a gift after long reflection. It's not something others can give you with compliments or encouragement. Real confidence is built like a structure, brick by brick, moment by moment, decision by decision. And every brick is laid through action. You don't become confident by thinking about doing the thing. You become confident by doing it, especially when you're unsure. People often assume confident individuals are fearless. But confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act anyway. A woman who speaks on stage may still feel nerves in her chest. What separates her is that she walks forward while her hands shake. Over time, that repetition trains her nervous system. The fear may never vanish, but her courage becomes louder. That's the soil where real confidence grows. We wait for confidence to precede bold choices, but it doesn't work that way. Confidence is the result of the bold choice. It's the internal yes that follows external evidence, and that evidence comes only through repetition. You prove to yourself that you can survive the thing you once avoided. You begin to expect capability, not because you were born with it, but because you built it slowly and steadily. Take a person who's never set boundaries. They may feel guilt or anxiety the first time they say no, but saying it once changes the internal narrative. They realize they didn't lose love, they didn't collapse, and the world didn't end. That single moment plants a seed. With each repetition, the voice inside that once whispered, "You can't," begins to soften, and eventually it stops talking altogether. Confidence doesn't require perfection, it requires participation. Showing up before you feel qualified. Speaking before every word is polished. Moving before the fear has cleared. Every time you act in alignment with who you want to be, you earn a deeper trust with yourself. And that trust is the real source of confidence. Not applause, not outcome, but self-honor. The confident version of you is not a distant dream. It's a version of you that acts consistently despite discomfort. Each time you shrink back, you reinforce the idea that your fear is stronger than you. But each time you lean in, even a little, you disrupt that story. And the disruption is where the rewiring begins. Think of the first time someone drove a car. There was tension, overcorrection, maybe even panic. But over time, muscle memory took over. Not because the task got easier, but because repetition made it familiar. Confidence operates the same way. The unfamiliar becomes manageable through exposure. And the more you expose yourself to growth, the more you normalize it. Real confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself. It walks into rooms with presence, not performance. And that presence is earned in private. In the early mornings you show up. In the quiet decisions to keep going, in the moments when no one's watching but you. Those unseen moments become your foundation. Confidence built on external validation is fragile. It crumbles when applause fades. But confidence built through action is resilient. It remembers every step you took, every discomfort you faced, every small win you didn't broadcast. You carry that within you like armor. Not flashy, but steady, and that steadiness is power. You don't need to conquer the mountain in one attempt. Confidence isn't found at the peak. It's built on the climb. Each foothold, each slip, each recovery is part of the process. And even when you fall, you learn something you didn't know before. That knowledge becomes your advantage next time. Progress, not perfection, is the currency of earned confidence. There's a myth that you need to feel good to act boldly, but often the opposite is true. Action creates the good feeling. A small task completed, a tough conversation handled, a fear faced. These all generate a quiet pride. That pride is earned, not imagined. And the more you act, the more you give yourself reasons to trust who you're becoming. Avoidance, on the other hand, robs you of that trust. Every time you choose comfort over courage, you reinforce a story of limitation. But when you step forward, even clumsily, you tell your nervous system, "We can do hard things." And over time, it believes you. Confidence is simply that, the body believing what the soul has always known. You're more capable than you think. Consider someone who has been rejected repeatedly but keeps showing up. That's not arrogance, that's earned confidence. They're not immune to the pain of failure. They've simply seen it enough to realize it doesn't define them. That kind of resilience doesn't come from theory, it comes from the battlefield of experience, where effort matters more than outcome. Confidence grows through self-respect, and self-respect is the natural byproduct of consistency. When you do what you say you'll do, even in small things, you build alignment. You no longer need to convince yourself that you're reliable. You know you are, because your actions have shown it. That quiet integrity becomes your backbone. There's a moment in every journey when you feel like quitting. That's when confidence is either abandoned or strengthened. If you keep moving, even slowly, even imperfectly, you'll walk through that fire and come out shaped, not scarred. Confidence doesn't mean you never doubt. It means you've learned how to keep going through the doubt. You don't build confidence in isolation. You build it by engaging with life, by doing the things that scare you, stretch you, and require you to show up differently. Even one brave decision can ripple into new self-belief. Not because it changed the world, but because it changed your relationship with yourself. A child learning to walk falls hundreds of times, but they never question their right to keep trying. Somewhere along the way, adults lose that persistence. But confidence returns when you return to that mindset. Falling isn't failing, it's feedback, and standing up again is what makes you strong. Comparison will try to rob you of earned confidence. But you can't measure your courage by someone else's highlight reel. Your journey is built on your struggles, your timeline, your values. Confidence built in your own shoes fits differently. It's not flashy, but it's real, and real always lasts longer than loud. Let your actions speak before your belief does. Let movement replace overthinking. Let your days be filled with small, brave decisions. You don't need to wait for a transformation to feel worthy. Each action you take in alignment with your values is a declaration. I am becoming. And that becoming builds confidence. So the next time doubt whispers in your ear, remember this: the confidence you want isn't a destination. It's a rhythm, built in effort, sustained by choice, fueled by integrity. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It rises slowly, like the sun. With each day you act in alignment with your highest self. Keep going. Confidence is meeting you on the way. Chapter 6. Motion is the cure for overthinking. Overthinking is a silent thief. It steals your time, your energy, and your courage. You sit trapped inside loops of what if, replaying conversations, imagining failures, and waiting for clarity that never comes. But clarity doesn't appear in stillness. It arrives in motion. Action cuts through the fog in ways that thinking never can. You solve problems faster by moving than by analyzing them endlessly. When you're stuck in your head, every choice feels heavy. You hesitate, second-guess, and drown in scenarios that may never happen. But the moment you take even a small step forward, the weight shifts. Movement disrupts the cycle of rumination. A single action, even imperfect, brings more information than 1,000 thoughts. Life responds to what you do, not just what you imagine. Think of someone pacing before a cold pool. They keep calculating how cold it will feel, but once they jump in, their body adjusts, and the fear disappears. Overthinking is that endless pacing. Motion is the leap. You'll never think yourself into courage, you act your way into it, and each small movement makes the next one easier. We often believe we need the perfect plan before we begin. But perfect plans are illusions. They only emerge after you start. A writer who waits for the perfect sentence writes nothing. But if they put one rough line on paper, the next line flows. The cure for overthinking isn't in perfect preparation. It's in messy, honest motion. Consider how anxiety grows when you remain idle. It builds like pressure in a sealed container. But when you act, even in small ways, that pressure releases. You learn by doing. You discover answers by engaging with the real world. And even when your first step is wrong, it gives you direction. Stagnation only multiplies confusion. There was once a man who wanted to start a business, but spent years planning. He read books, watched videos, and took notes, yet never launched. One day, a friend asked him to test his idea on a small scale. That single action brought lessons no research could teach. Within months, he adjusted, improved, and succeeded. His breakthrough wasn't knowledge, it was motion. When you're caught in overthinking, your mind tricks you into believing more thought is the solution. But the mind needs evidence to quiet down, and evidence comes only from results. Taking action, even while uncertain, tells your brain, we're moving forward now. Suddenly, fear has less room to speak. The noise of doubt fades when the rhythm of doing begins. Overthinking often hides behind perfectionism. You tell yourself you're not ready, not skilled enough, not certain enough, but readiness isn't a prerequisite, it's a result. Every expert was once a beginner who moved before they believed they were prepared. Progress requires the humility to begin before you have it all figured out. Think of a person who starts running to clear their mind. The first steps feel heavy, but as the body warms up, the mental fog lifts. That's the power of motion. It connects the mind and body in a way that thinking alone can't. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem isn't to sit and analyze it, but to move and let the solution reveal itself. When you start acting, you also break the illusion of failure being fatal. You realize that mistakes are not the end, they're data. A wrong step teaches more than 100 hours of cautious planning. Failure stops being something to fear and becomes something to learn from. Action reframes fear into feedback. Overthinking thrives in isolation. But when you take steps, make calls, write drafts, have conversations, you open windows to reality. Reality is always less terrifying than your imagination. The worst-case scenarios you build in your head almost never unfold the way you picture them. But you'll never know that truth unless you move. Motion has a momentum of its own. The first step feels like lifting a heavy stone, but the second step feels lighter, and the third even lighter. Soon you're no longer thinking about how to start, you're simply moving. This is why action is such a powerful antidote to doubt. Once momentum takes over, overthinking loses its grip. A woman once spent years fearing she wasn't good enough to paint. One day she picked up a brush and told herself she'd paint badly on purpose. But something magical happened. The act of painting silenced her fear. It didn't matter if the result was perfect. The simple act of creating freed her from the paralysis of overthinking. When you hesitate, you feed the belief that you can't. Every day you delay, that belief grows roots. But when you take even one uncomfortable step, you disrupt that pattern. You remind yourself that fear is not fact, it's only a feeling. And feelings are temporary, while action leaves permanent marks on your growth. Overthinking also steals joy. It turns opportunities into burdens, moments into calculations. But when you move, when you immerse yourself in action, your mind shifts from what if to what's next. That shift creates presence. And presence is where confidence is born. You feel alive when you're in motion, not when you're stuck in your head. You don't need to know every answer to start. You just need the courage to take one honest step. That step doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be perfect. It simply needs to exist. Because once you move, the path begins to reveal itself. You can't steer a parked car. You need motion before you can find direction. There's wisdom in planning, but planning without execution becomes fear disguised as preparation. The cure is to take one step, no matter how small, that turns the idea into something tangible. Writing one line, making one call, creating one draft. Small actions are like seeds. Plant them, and they grow into clarity. The truth is, you'll never think your way out of overthinking. Thought alone will never break the loop. Only doing can silence the noise. And when you begin doing, even imperfectly, you'll realize that reality is far more forgiving than your mind suggests. Your mind imagines monsters. Motion reveals that they were shadows all along. When you feel overwhelmed, shift your focus from the size of the mountain to the next step on the path. Just one. That single step may seem insignificant, but it's the key to momentum. It's proof that you're not stuck. That small win, however minor, breaks the paralysis and sparks confidence. From there, the next step becomes possible. Every time you choose motion over overthinking, you reclaim your power. You stop being a prisoner of imagined scenarios and become a participant in your real life. Over time, this habit changes everything, not because you'll always succeed, but because you'll always learn. And each action you take builds trust with yourself. So the next time your thoughts spiral, remember, you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to begin. One step, one action, one moment of forward motion. Overthinking thrives on delay, but action dissolves it like sunlight burning through fog. Keep moving. The cure is always in motion. Chapter 7. You don't fake it, you practice it. Confidence, discipline, patience. These aren't costumes you put on to trick the world, they're muscles you build through repeated use. The phrase, "fake it till you make it," misses the point. You don't need to fake anything. You need to practice who you want to become. That's how the internal catches up with the external, not by pretending, but by doing it enough times until it feels like truth. A shy man once watched charismatic speakers and told himself he could never be like them. But instead of faking confidence, he practiced presence. He spoke to one person a day. He stood taller, slowed his breath, looked people in the eye. These weren't performances, they were practices. And eventually, he wasn't mimicking confidence. He was confident because he'd lived his way into it. The danger in faking is that it disconnects you from your integrity. It teaches you to wear a mask instead of develop a skill. When you practice something, you're building alignment. You're saying, "This is the person I want to be, and I'm willing to put in the effort, not just wear the image." And that effort is what builds real transformation. Every skill begins with a version of you who doesn't know how yet. And that's not shameful, it's sacred. Practicing is the act of honoring your potential before it fully shows up. It means showing up when it's clumsy, when it's uncomfortable, when it's not quite there. That messy beginning isn't fake. It's the first honest layer of becoming. Think of someone learning to play the piano. Their early notes are off. Their fingers hesitate. But they don't fake knowing how to play. They practice, slowly, faithfully. Over time, their body remembers what their mind once struggled with. This is how self-respect builds, not through illusion, but through effort repeated. You don't pretend to be kind. You practice kindness when it's hard. You don't fake self-control. You practice restraint when your emotions want control. Each choice becomes a representative. Each rep becomes a habit. And habits form character. You don't fool the world into believing you're centered. You train yourself to be centered, one difficult moment at a time. There was once a woman who wanted to lead, but she struggled with doubt. Instead of putting on a confident persona, she chose to lead in small ways, taking initiative in meetings, encouraging her peers, staying steady in conflict. Each act was a practice in the leader she was becoming. And that practice, not any performance, is what eventually earned her real authority. Faking something feels hollow, like standing in borrowed shoes. But practicing something feels grounding, like walking your own path, one honest step at a time. You don't have to convince anyone. You just have to keep doing the work. Because repetition doesn't just build skill, it builds identity. We often underestimate the value of showing up before we feel ready, but that's the gateway to mastery. You don't wait until the fear leaves. You practice moving with it. You show up nervous, uncertain, and still choose to take part. That participation is what transforms you. It's not performance, it's process. When you fake, you're trying to be perceived a certain way. When you practice, you're trying to become a certain way. One is outward, fragile, and dependent on reaction. The other is inward, sturdy, and based on intention. You don't need to impress. You need to improve, and that happens only through repetition, not image. Sometimes people will misread your practice as performance. They'll assume you're pretending because you're still learning. Let them. What matters is that you know the truth. You're in the arena, doing the work. And the work always wins in the long run. Show up with sincerity and let time validate your evolution. Practicing who you want to be also means giving yourself room to mess up without shame. You're not expected to get it perfect. You're expected to keep returning. That return, that refusal to quit, is what refines you. The stumble doesn't cancel the step. If anything, it deepens the practice with humility. You don't fake patience by smiling while you boil inside. You practice patience by breathing through discomfort, by choosing not to react, by creating space between feeling and action. And every time you do, you reinforce a version of yourself that can be trusted under pressure. That trust becomes your quiet strength. A young artist once struggled with imposter syndrome. She feared her work wasn't good enough, but she kept creating, not to prove herself, but to grow herself. Over time, her hands learned what her heart hadn't fully believed yet. She didn't fake being an artist. She practiced her way into believing it. Even character traits like courage or humility are learned, not given. You don't fake humility by lowering your voice. You practice it by listening more than you speak. You don't fake courage by acting reckless. You practice it by standing in discomfort with integrity. These things are shaped in repetition. When you stop performing and start practicing, your focus shifts from outcome to process. You stop worrying about how others see you and start caring about how you see yourself. And that internal clarity is far more powerful than external approval. It guides your choices, even when no one's watching. Sometimes practice is silent. It looks like sitting with your anger instead of exploding. It looks like showing up to your work even when uninspired. It looks like forgiving again when the ego wants revenge. These small, invisible practices are the ones that shape you the most. They turn values into identity. You won't always feel like the person you're trying to become, but you don't need to. You just need to keep showing up as them, through choice, not image. Eventually, the feeling catches up with the behavior. And what once felt like effort becomes second nature. Not fake, not forced, just integrated. Faking demands energy to maintain the illusion. Practicing demands energy to build reality. One drains you, the other strengthens you. Choose the path that leaves you better, not just looking better. The truth of who you're becoming will always outlast the mask of who you're pretending to be. So if you're not there yet, that's okay. Keep practicing, one choice at a time, one breath at a time. The person you admire isn't faking it. They've simply practiced long enough for it to feel natural. You can get there too. Not by pretending, not by performing, but by honoring the process and trusting that practice becomes truth. You don't become something by wearing the mask of it. You become it by doing what that version of you would do, even when it's inconvenient. If you want to be more disciplined, you don't fake discipline. You show up on the days when motivation is absent. Each time you act in line with that higher version, you loosen the grip of the habits that held you back. There is something powerful about practicing your way through resistance. Resistance doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're stretching. And stretching is uncomfortable for a reason. It means you're making space for more. More patience, more resilience, more clarity. You don't become better by avoiding resistance, but by building the strength to move through it, slowly, daily. A quiet truth most don't speak about is this: even the people who seem naturally confident are still practicing. They may look composed, but they've trained that calm through repetition. They've failed, adjusted, reflected, and returned. No one arrives. Everyone maintains. Practice never ends. It just becomes a way of life. When you're tempted to imitate, pause and ask, who am I becoming when I do this? If it's a performance to avoid discomfort, it will never last. But if it's a small decision in alignment with your values, it will become part of your foundation. Faking is a surface solution. Practicing is a root-level change. Go deeper. You can practice being grounded by how you speak to yourself. The inner voice you're used to may be critical, impatient, doubtful. But that voice isn't fixed. Every time you gently reframe your thoughts, you're training a new tone. It won't feel natural at first, but repetition rewires. What you practice mentally becomes who you are emotionally. Even honesty is something you practice. Telling the truth, even when it's hard, builds inner strength. It teaches you that you can handle discomfort without hiding, that you can face consequences without abandoning yourself. When you practice honesty, you learn to trust your own voice again. And that trust is priceless. Think of the version of you that exists a year from now, more calm, more focused, more free. That version isn't built through wishful thinking. They're shaped by the version of you today who chooses to do the hard thing with a soft heart, who practices instead of performs, who shows up not because it's easy, but because it's right. When you're in practice mode, mistakes become part of the process instead of proof that you're unworthy. You no longer attach your value to outcomes. You detach from the need to be impressive. And in that humility, you begin to grow with grace. There's something freeing about letting yourself be a work in progress. Someone once said, "You are what you repeatedly do." That doesn't just apply to habits. It applies to identity. If you practice peace in chaos, you become a peaceful person. If you practice bravery in discomfort, you become someone who leads. These aren't just behaviors, they're declarations of who you're willing to become. Practice is about choosing again and again, even after you slip. It's refusing to let one bad day define you. It's showing up to your craft, your values, your vision, not perfectly, but faithfully. The person who practices long enough becomes someone even they didn't know they could be. And that evolution is always quiet before it becomes visible. There's a kind of sincerity in practice that cannot be faked. It's found in early mornings, deep breaths, and late nights of showing up when no one is watching. There is no applause in those moments, only honesty. And the person who honors those quiet hours becomes someone that no applause can replace. When you find yourself unsure of who you are or what you're doing, return to practice. Pick up the small habits that ground you, the ones that feel like home. Practice doesn't require clarity, it creates it. By doing something real, your path becomes clearer, one step at a time. Movement clarifies the mind. You don't need to prove anything to the world to be worthy of practicing. You're allowed to be a beginner. You're allowed to try without mastery. You're allowed to be imperfect and committed at the same time. That's how you grow without shame. And that's how self-respect is born, not in being perfect, but in staying honest. A man once told his son, "Don't try to be a great man. Just try to be a man who chooses what's right, even when it's hard. If you do that enough times, greatness will find you." That's the truth of practice. It's not glamorous, but it transforms you in ways no shortcut ever could. When you choose practice over performance, you begin to live more slowly, more deeply. You stop rushing to arrive. You begin to enjoy the texture of growth, the quiet win of choosing not to quit, the small dignity of showing up one more time than you wanted to. Those moments make you. Practice is also how you build emotional endurance. The more you practice staying grounded in chaos, the less easily you're shaken. The more you practice compassion when angry, the less likely you are to become reactive. These are quiet wins that others may not notice, but you will feel them. They're victories of the soul. If you ever feel like a fraud, pause. Ask yourself, am I faking or am I simply practicing something I haven't mastered yet? There's a big difference. One drains you. The other is a sign you're alive and growing. Let go of the need to feel fully formed. Give yourself permission to be someone in motion. You don't need a finish line to start. You need intention. You need willingness. And you need to stop trying to become all at once. Instead, commit to the practice. Let it shape you slowly in ways you can't predict but can trust. Who you become will surprise you. Not because you faked your way there, but because you earned it. So when doubt shows up, practice courage. When fear tightens your chest, practice breath. When you want to quit, practice one more step. You are never as far as you think, and never as alone. Your quiet practice is enough. It's building you day by day, whether anyone notices or not. In the end, you won't remember the times you tried to look like you had it all together. You'll remember the moments you stayed honest, stayed consistent, and stayed real. That's the version of you that practice builds, not perfect, not polished, but powerful in a way no mask could ever create. Chapter 8. The future you starts with one bold move. The version of you you keep imagining, the calm, strong, grounded one, doesn't appear out of nowhere. That future self is the result of one decision made in the present moment. Not a massive overhaul, not a perfect plan, just one bold move. That's where every transformation begins. In a choice that says, I refuse to stay where I am. Boldness doesn't always look like grand gestures. Sometimes it's a quiet yes when you're scared. Sometimes it's saying no to what no longer fits. It's applying for the job, ending the relationship, moving to a new city, or simply telling the truth. One decision can carry more weight than 100 intentions, because action echoes. A man once sat on a business idea for years, convinced he wasn't ready. Then one morning, fed up with his own hesitation, he sent a single email to a potential client. That email changed everything, not because it guaranteed success, but because it broke the cycle of delay. That one act disrupted the old version of him and gave the future version a place to begin. You don't need certainty to make a bold move. You need courage, just enough to push through the noise of doubt. The future you is built not through comfort, but through risk. You won't feel fully ready, and that's the point. Growth doesn't wait for you to be sure. It meets you the moment you choose, despite the uncertainty. Boldness isn't recklessness. It's clarity in motion. It's deciding that the cost of staying the same is greater than the fear of change. That moment of clarity often comes in quiet ways. In long walks, in late-night thoughts, in honest journal entries. You realize the life you're waiting for is actually waiting on you. Every major turning point in someone's life can be traced back to a moment when they said yes to something uncomfortable. They didn't have it all figured out, but they trusted that their next chapter wouldn't write itself. The pen was in their hand, and so is yours. You're only ever one bold choice away from a new trajectory. Think of the future you as a signal, calling you forward. They already exist, not in time but in potential, and that potential unlocks every time you make a move that aligns with who you want to become. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be honest. Boldness doesn't wait for a map, it becomes the map. Sometimes that move is internal, setting a boundary you've avoided, forgiving someone you swore you never would, choosing rest over burnout. These quiet decisions matter just as much as the loud ones. They're the seeds of change that, when watered, grow into a completely different reality. You may be afraid of making the wrong move, but staying frozen guarantees more regret than taking imperfect action. A misstep can be corrected, a direction can be changed, but nothing can be improved until you're in motion. Boldness gives you something to work with. It breaks inertia. Imagine a woman who walked away from a life that looked good on paper but felt hollow. Everyone questioned her. But she knew, deep down, that alignment matters more than approval. That one decision cost her comfort, but bought her freedom. That's what boldness does. It rearranges your entire reality in favor of what's real. The future version of you isn't waiting for a perfect moment. They're waiting for this moment, when you decide to step into discomfort for the sake of growth. You won't become that person by thinking about them. You become them by honoring them now, in action, in courage, in truth. Bold moves don't always feel big in the moment. Often, they feel quiet and shaky, but their impact unfolds over time. Months later, you'll look back at that one decision and realize it rerouted your entire path. And all it took was one honest step in the direction of who you were always meant to be. Sometimes boldness is admitting you want more, that you've outgrown where you are, that comfort has turned into a cage. The moment you name that truth, you open the door. You don't have to leap. You just have to walk forward, one step at a time, into the space where your growth has room to stretch. The future isn't created in giant leaps. It's created in decisive shifts. A change in routine, a new habit, a different response in the same old situation. When you choose differently, even once, you prove to yourself that change is possible. And that proof becomes the fuel for everything that follows. You don't have to wait for the pain to get unbearable before you move. You can move because you deserve to. Because joy is calling. Because there's more to your story than playing small. Boldness isn't about escaping suffering. It's about walking toward truth, even when it shakes your voice. People often fear that boldness will lead to loss. And sometimes it does. But what you lose was never meant to hold the next version of you. What remains, and what rises to meet you, is what belongs. One bold move clears space for that alignment. It wipes away the noise and reveals what's real. Trust that the bold decision you're resisting is exactly the one that will strengthen you. Not because it will go perfectly, but because it will require you to grow. And that growth is worth every tremble, every risk, every step into the unknown. On the other side of fear is the beginning of freedom. If you're unsure where to begin, ask, what am I tolerating that the future me wouldn't accept? What choices is that version of me making today? Then, bring one of those choices into the present. Embody it now. Make it real through action. That's how time folds. That's how you meet your future self early. Boldness is not loud. It's deliberate. It's quiet, consistent courage. It's the refusal to shrink back into what's easy. It's saying yes to your evolution, even when the road ahead is foggy. Boldness doesn't come from knowing how it ends. It comes from honoring the call to begin. So whatever decision you've been circling, stop spinning in thought. Feel the fear, hold it gently, and move anyway. Because the future you isn't waiting on perfection, they're waiting on your first bold step, the one that turns the page, the one that says, I'm not waiting anymore. The longer you hesitate, the more the moment slips into memory. Boldness is fleeting. It asks for your hand, not your hesitation. You can overanalyze it into paralysis, or you can honor the spark by acting before your fear talks you out of it. Some of the most life-altering decisions are made in seconds, not because they're rushed, but because the soul recognizes what the mind fears. You don't become the future version of you by waiting to feel brave. You become them by doing the brave thing before you feel ready. That's what gives birth to new strength. It's not the absence of nerves that makes something bold. It's the decision to move while those nerves are still there, humming under your ribs. One bold move has a ripple effect. It touches the way you think, speak, walk, and show up. You start seeing yourself differently, not because your whole life has changed overnight, but because you changed. You prove to yourself that you can trust your own fire, and that shift creates a deeper sense of self-respect. Sometimes the move isn't about proving anything to others. It's about keeping a promise to yourself. The promise that you will no longer betray your potential for the comfort of what's familiar. That kind of integrity is sacred. When you make even one decision in alignment with your future, you start showing up differently in every room you enter. A young man once decided to stop hiding his creativity. He posted one poem, heart racing, palms sweating. That poem didn't go viral, but it lit something inside him. It reminded him that expression is more important than validation. That one decision gave him permission to keep creating. That's what boldness does. It opens the door that shame kept shut. You may be tempted to wait until your environment supports your move. But the truth is, boldness often creates the environment. When you act in alignment with who you're becoming, you attract different conversations, people, and opportunities. The outside begins to reflect the inside. But the inside must move first. Boldness doesn't guarantee instant success. Sometimes it leads to failure. But even that failure is forward. Because failure in motion teaches more than success in theory. Every misstep becomes part of your map. Every stumble is a chapter in the book of who you're becoming, and that book will always be worth writing. The fear of judgment often keeps people from acting boldly. But those who judge are usually the ones afraid to move themselves. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Your job isn't to be easy to explain. Your job is to be faithful to the version of you that refuses to shrink back into silence. There's a difference between discomfort and danger. Boldness lives in discomfort, the place where your ego feels exposed but your soul feels alive. That's how you know the move is meant for you. It scares you, but it also makes you feel more awake than anything else. That feeling? That's the future tugging you forward. Every future is shaped by present momentum. A small shift in trajectory, one email, one boundary, one day without self-betrayal, can reroute everything. The magic isn't in how loud the move is, it's in how true it is. Boldness isn't always public. Sometimes the most courageous thing you'll ever do happens in private. The future isn't waiting with open arms, it's waiting with open tests. It wants to see what you're willing to let go of in order to grow. It asks for discomfort, trade-offs, and temporary uncertainty, but in exchange, it offers something priceless. A version of you that knows you didn't wait for life to choose you. You chose yourself. There's a window in every journey when the old way stops feeling like home, but the new way hasn't fully arrived. That in-between space feels lonely, uncertain. But that's exactly where boldness belongs. It's not a bridge you wait for. It's a step you take while the bridge builds beneath your feet. Bold decisions often reveal who was never truly for you. But they also reveal who is. When you act boldly, you lose the support that required you to stay small, and you gain the support that wants you to rise. That realignment may hurt, but it's necessary. You can't carry every relationship into your next chapter. You can delay for years, then shift your path in a single morning. One text sent, one project started, one confrontation faced. The world may not notice immediately, but your soul will. And once your soul feels the power of alignment, it's hard to go back to sleep. Boldness is a spiritual awakening. When you see someone living fully, you're not seeing luck. You're seeing the compound effect of past bold moves. The moments no one clapped for, the choices that scared them, the conversations that ended chapters. You're seeing someone who didn't wait to feel ready, they moved, and belief followed. Your identity shifts every time you choose yourself in a new way. You start rewriting the narrative, from "I hope I can" to "I know I will." That confidence doesn't come from speeches or quotes. It comes from doing what your doubt said you couldn't. That's what gives your voice its weight. Boldness clears out what's stale. It makes space for breath, for creativity, for truth. The things that feel stagnant in your life are often waiting on your courage to disrupt them. Stuckness isn't a life sentence, it's a signal. And the bold move is often the very answer to that signal, even when it feels risky. A bold move isn't about knowing everything, it's about knowing what you can't keep doing. It's clarity wrapped in discomfort. It's the deep sense that you were made for more than maintaining. And the only way out of the loop is to interrupt it with something different. That interruption becomes transformation. You don't need to be the loudest, the strongest, or the most confident person in the room. You just need to be the one who moves, who acts, who steps into alignment even when it terrifies you, because in that step, the future meets you. Not with perfection, but with momentum, with direction, with power. So take the breath, make the call, speak the truth, walk away, begin again. Do the thing your future self will look back on and whisper, "That was the moment everything changed." Not because it was easy, but because it was bold. And boldness will always be the birthplace of your next chapter. Chapter 9. Forget perfect. Begin with what you have. Perfection is a mirage. It looks reachable from afar, but the closer you get, the more it shifts. Waiting for perfect conditions, perfect timing, or perfect clarity only delays what wants to begin now. The people who change their lives aren't the ones who wait. They're the ones who start messy, unsure, and honest. A man once waited years to launch his idea. He told himself he needed a better logo, more money, a bigger audience. But one day, he launched anyway, with shaky hands and a simple message. People didn't care about the polish, they cared about the heart. That first imperfect launch led to everything that came after. You don't need the best tools. You need the tool you have, and the willingness to use it well. Mastery isn't born from having everything. It's born from using what's within reach until it multiplies. The pencil becomes the painting. The walk becomes the run. The whisper becomes the speech. Start where your feet already are. Perfectionism is fear dressed in ambition. It convinces you that excellence requires endless delay. But excellence isn't about waiting. It's about beginning and adjusting as you go. The artist who sketches daily with a cheap pen will outgrow the one who waits for the perfect canvas. Use what you have. Use it now. Every skill, every business, every dream you admire began as a draft. Someone said yes before they felt worthy. They didn't let missing resources stop them. They let available ones start them. The courage to begin without certainty is the very thing that builds momentum. Clarity comes after commitment. You can't steer a still ship. Progress demands motion, not precision. Begin poorly, begin afraid, begin unfinished, but begin. You'll learn more by moving than by planning in circles. Your first try doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be real, and real is always more powerful than perfect. Think of a seed. It doesn't wait for the soil to be flawless. It roots into what's available, even cracked concrete, even harsh terrain. Growth is stubborn. It doesn't wait. It adapts. And you can too. You're allowed to create in imperfect circumstances. You're allowed to move before everything makes sense. Someone once told a young woman she needed better equipment to be a real musician, but she kept writing songs in her bedroom with a single old guitar. That guitar became her voice. Years later, people didn't ask what she recorded with. They just felt the emotion in her sound. What you have now is enough to begin. Perfect timing is an illusion. Most breakthroughs happen in the middle of chaos, doubt, or disruption. Life won't pause and offer you a flawless window. It waits to see who's willing to walk forward while it's raining. And the ones who do, they build something the perfect planners never touch: resilience. Forget the polished image. Forget the curated script. Authenticity lands deeper than perfection ever could. Your truth, told honestly, even roughly, will reach people in ways smooth performance cannot. What breaks through isn't shine, it's sincerity. Show up raw if you must, but show up. You don't need a new version of yourself to start. You need the current version to stop hesitating. This you, with all the flaws, the confusion, the scattered tools, is still enough to take the first step. Future you isn't waiting for a better version. They're waiting for this one to move. We glorify finish lines and forget the shaky first mile. But that first mile is where the real courage lives. That's where the identity shift begins. You stop being a dreamer and start being a doer. Not because you have everything figured out, but because you've decided to walk with what you've got. Sometimes the only thing holding you back is the story you're telling yourself about what you lack. Flip the script. Make a list of what's already in your hands: knowledge, experience, passion, curiosity. Those are your tools. Use them like they're gold, because to your growth they are. You don't need the confidence to start. You need the willingness to look awkward, feel unsure, and keep going anyway. That messy beginning is a rite of passage. Everyone you admire went through it. They just didn't let the mess stop them. They let it mold them. A young writer once shared their first piece online, full of typos, too short, unsure of its value. But someone read it and felt seen. That moment wasn't about polish. It was about connection. Sometimes your imperfection is what allows someone else to feel permission to grow too. Beginning with what you have also teaches humility, and humility keeps you grounded. When you earn growth instead of waiting for ideal conditions, you build character along with progress. You respect your craft more, you appreciate the struggle, and you never forget what it took to start. The tools you think are not enough are often the exact ones that lead to your breakthrough. Because limitations force creativity, they sharpen your focus. When you don't have 10 options, you master one, and that mastery becomes your edge. Use your limits as leverage. Your future success story will not say, "and then everything was perfect, so they finally started." It will say, "they had every reason to wait, but they moved anyway." That choice is what separates those who arrive from those who watch others pass them by. You don't rise by waiting. You rise by risking. You don't transform by polishing every edge before you begin. You transform by stepping in, rough edges and all, and letting the process shape you. The sculptor doesn't wait for the perfect block. They work with what's in front of them. So should you. So today, stop trying to perfect your starting point. Begin with the broken pieces. Begin with the simple tools. Begin with your uneven voice, your trembling hand, your quiet doubt. Begin now, not when you're ready, but because you're willing. Because what you have right now is enough. Perfection is a moving goalpost. Even when you get close, it shifts again. That's why the goal should never be perfection. It should be progress. The work you do today may not be flawless, but it will be better than yesterday's silence. And if you keep going, tomorrow's work will be better than today's courage. The fear of starting wrong is the root of many stalled dreams. But truthfully, wrong starts often lead to right paths. You'll never know what works until you're willing to see what doesn't. The discomfort of missteps is far less damaging than the regret of never stepping at all. Start messy and let wisdom come from movement. A carpenter doesn't wait for a perfect day to build. They work with the weather they have. They cut wood that has knots. They adapt. Life is the same. Waiting for the ideal setup wastes the time you could be learning, adjusting, and becoming. You're not here to perform perfect work. You're here to evolve through it. Some of the most beloved books, songs, and creations were born from limitation, a lack of budget, a short deadline, a broken tool. But the creators didn't freeze. They leaned into what was present, because it's not the resources that define the result. It's the resilience. The world respects starters more than planners. Comparison to others will always make what you have feel like less. But those you compare yourself to, they started where you are, sometimes with less. They didn't arrive with everything. They arrived with movement. Comparing your starting line to someone else's middle chapter only breeds self-doubt. Stay focused on your progress. It's not about the scale, it's about the sincerity. One video, one paragraph, one sketch can ignite a chain reaction. You don't need to build a masterpiece on day one. You just need to touch your craft, feel your calling, show yourself that you can create before you feel fully equipped. That first creation holds power no algorithm can measure. The inner critic will always demand perfection. That voice will whisper, "You're not ready, this isn't good enough." People will judge, but you get to answer back with action. Not because the critic disappears, but because your courage gets louder. And every time you move anyway, that voice weakens. A woman once decided to start her podcast using only her phone. No fancy mic, no studio. Just her voice and a quiet room. That imperfect start became the most freeing thing she'd ever done. Her listeners didn't want perfect audio, they wanted truth, and her decision to begin gave others permission to speak up too. You won't know your voice until you use it. You won't know your strength until it's tested, and you won't know what you're capable of until you begin before you feel complete. Wholeness is not a requirement for movement. Movement is often what creates wholeness, by reconnecting you to your own becoming. If you wait until everything is figured out, you'll never leave the planning stage. There will always be something missing, but that missing is part of your unique learning curve. You learn on the field, not from the sidelines. Trust that the lessons will find you once you start walking. You may think you need confidence to act, but action is what builds confidence. That first step is not about knowing, it's about choosing. Choosing to show up for yourself, even with trembling hands and unfinished ideas. Confidence doesn't grow in stillness, it blooms in forward motion. The people who seem ahead of you aren't better, they're just earlier. They chose to start with less. They embraced awkward beginnings. They fell and got back up while you were still thinking. You don't need to catch up, you just need to begin. Your pace is valid, your journey is real. There's something beautifully human about starting before you're enough. It means your soul is louder than your doubt. It means you value movement more than image. This is where self-trust is forged, not in knowing, but in choosing. Choosing to begin with shaky voice, uneven breath, and an honest heart. One bold, imperfect move says more than 1,000 delayed plans. That move might not change everything in the moment, but it changes you. It says, "I'm not waiting to be chosen, I choose myself." That declaration, whispered through action, is the foundation of real momentum. You don't have to hide your lack of polish. Let your audience, your readers, your listeners see the process. Let them witness the climb. That vulnerability is magnetic. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with real effort, real flaws, real stories. Your imperfections are often your strongest bridge. Sometimes what you already have isn't lacking, it's underutilized. Look around. Your skills, your voice, your knowledge. Are you using them or hoarding them while waiting to improve? Begin using them in simple, real ways. Their power is unlocked through application, not storage. You'll find that the more you do with what you have, the more you're given. Confidence expands, clarity sharpens, doors open, not because you forced them, but because you met life halfway. The universe responds to movement, and the moment you begin, even clumsily, life starts leaning in. You can build consistency long before you feel mastery. You can build rhythm while still learning your melody. Start showing up before it feels smooth, because showing up is what polishes the edge. You'll never sculpt the statue if you keep waiting for the perfect chisel. A blank page can feel terrifying. So can an empty canvas or a silent room. But those spaces aren't voids, they're invitations. Begin with a sentence. Begin with a color. Begin with a breath. Fill the space with motion, not judgment. Your role is not to be flawless, it's to be faithful to the start. And when you look back months from now, you won't remember how perfect it was. You'll remember that you dared, that you began when it wasn't easy, that you showed up before you felt worthy, and that one choice, to start with what you had, changed your life in ways perfect never could. Chapter 10. Prove it to yourself, not the world. The loudest wins often look like applause, trophies, or recognition, but the most meaningful wins happen quietly, when no one's watching, when there's nothing to post, and when the only person who notices is you. You don't need to prove anything to the world to matter. You just need to live in a way that earns your own respect. External validation feels good, but it fades quickly. Inner validation, the kind you build by keeping promises to yourself, that stays. It anchors you. The world may change its opinion tomorrow, but the way you see yourself, the way you trust your own word, that's what shapes your confidence for life. A man once ran every morning for 90 days and didn't post about it once. No one praised him. But every time he laced up his shoes, he rewrote a story that used to say, "I'm lazy." By the end, he wasn't running for fitness anymore. He was running to prove to himself that he could follow through. That was the real reward. When your motivation is to be seen, you'll constantly shift your direction based on other people's eyes. But when your motivation is to honor your own growth, you move differently. You move with purpose, with privacy, with strength that doesn't need to be praised, only practiced. You can fool the world for a while, wear the mask, play the part, say the right things, but you can't fool yourself. Deep down, you know when you're aligned. You know when you're growing. And the only proof that matters is the kind that lets you sleep at night with quiet pride, not public praise. There's a unique power in doing something solely because it means something to you. No audience, no announcement, just a private vow that says, "I will rise because I'm worth rising for." When you begin to move like that, you stop chasing validation and start building unshakable character. Trying to prove yourself to others can become a trap. Their expectations become your chains. But when you turn inward and make it about integrity, about becoming someone you deeply respect, that's where real freedom begins. That's where you start becoming undeniable, even if no one's watching. Someone once told a young woman she wasn't leadership material. Instead of fighting to prove them wrong, she focused on becoming the leader she wished she had. Years later, people followed her, not because she proved a point, but because she embodied presence. Her journey was never about them. It was about her becoming who she needed to be. Validation from others is often inconsistent. Some days it's loud, some days it's gone. If your self-worth is attached to it, your sense of self will always be unstable. But when you validate your growth through your own evidence, your effort, your consistency, your small wins, you build something no one can take away. There's nothing more grounding than knowing you showed up for yourself when it was hardest, not to be admired, not to be liked, just to be aligned. That kind of integrity builds real power. It builds a reputation with yourself. And that reputation is the one that truly matters. Prove to yourself that you can wake up early, that you can speak your truth, that you can walk away from what drains you, that you can stay consistent even without results. These proofs are small in the world's eyes, but massive in your own. They're how you shift your identity from the inside out. A quiet commitment repeated over time is more powerful than any one-time performance. You don't need fireworks. You need follow-through. The world may overlook it, but your soul won't. It remembers every moment you honored your word, and that memory becomes your foundation. Let your discipline speak louder than your declarations. Let your choices be the proof. There's a still kind of strength that comes from building silently, from creating without applause, from being okay with no one noticing because you notice, and that's enough. There's a moment when proving it to others stops motivating you, because you realize you're giving your energy to a scoreboard you don't even believe in. That's the moment you shift, from performing to practicing, from impressing to becoming. That shift changes everything. Don't wait for someone to tell you you've made it. You decide, you define what matters, you create your own milestones, and the ones that mean the most? They usually happen in private. A decision to stay calm, a choice to show up, a promise kept. These are the real victories. You don't need to prove your worth through noise. Worth is built in silence, in the days you want to quit, but don't. In the nights you're afraid, but still move forward. In the times you feel unseen, but keep going. Those are the chapters that make your story unbreakable. The world will often miss your growth, but you won't. You'll feel it when you respond differently, when you recover quicker, when you speak with more intention, when your peace no longer depends on external approval. That's the proof you're becoming the person you once only imagined. It's tempting to use critics as fuel, to chase revenge success, but there's a deeper victory, the kind where your success isn't a reaction, it's a reflection of your standards, your work, your devotion to becoming someone you genuinely respect. Let that be enough. Your future self isn't watching to see who you proved wrong. They're watching to see if you stayed true, if you kept walking when no one clapped, if you built in the dark. They don't care about the opinions you changed. They care about the integrity you kept. So let the world wonder. Let them question. You have nothing to prove to them. Let your growth speak. Let your habits speak. Let your quiet wins become your loudest legacy. Because the only person you ever needed to prove it to was you. Every time you compare your path to someone else's highlight reel, you forget that your real work isn't out there. It's in here. The world may cheer for someone else louder, but that doesn't change the value of your quiet consistency. You're not building a performance. You're building a foundation, one that doesn't fall apart when attention fades. You know you're growing when your pride starts coming from the mirror, not the crowd. You wake up, look at yourself, and feel peace, not because everything's perfect, but because you didn't betray yourself. That kind of peace isn't loud. It's steady, and once you feel it, you stop chasing anything that doesn't align with it. People will always have opinions, expectations, judgments, but none of them are required for you to live a life that feels right to you. The most powerful thing you can do is measure yourself by your own growth, not in comparison, but in reflection. Am I better than I was yesterday? That's the only scoreboard that matters. You'll waste years trying to impress a world that changes its mind daily. So stop adjusting who you are to match what they expect. Be who you said you'd become, the version you promised yourself during quiet moments, the version that made you sit up straighter when you envisioned them. That's your compass. You prove it to yourself not in grand victories, but in small, invisible ones. When you bite your tongue and choose peace. When you wake up early without being told. When you do the work no one sees. These moments matter more than the spotlight, because they're between you and your future. Sometimes the loudest growth happens when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop defending your path, when you stop needing to be understood. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started trusting your process, trusting your reasons, trusting your inner knowing. A woman once journaled every day for a year, not for followers, not for a blog, but to stay connected to herself. At the end of that year, she didn't have likes or comments, but she had self-awareness, clarity, and a new relationship with her own thoughts. That was enough. That was everything. You don't need approval to make something meaningful. You don't need applause to make something matter. You just need presence, attention, care. The work you do with full attention, even when no one is watching, becomes part of who you are. It teaches you self-respect. That's more valuable than praise. If your only motivation is being seen, you'll burn out when no one's looking. But if your motivation is becoming better, regardless of who notices, your fire lasts longer. You're no longer chasing visibility, you're chasing truth. And truth sustains far more than admiration ever could. Let your habits speak for you. Let your patterns tell the story. When you move from seeking approval to building alignment, everything shifts. You show up differently. You speak with more depth. You become less reactive, more grounded. That's the kind of proof that can't be faked or taken. Not every victory needs to be posted. Not every milestone needs a witness. Some wins belong only to you. The day you finally let go of something toxic, the night you chose rest over resentment, the moment you forgave yourself. These are the moments that change you the most, even if the world never sees them. You don't owe the world a version of yourself that makes them comfortable. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself courage. You owe yourself the grace to evolve without needing permission. And when you give yourself those things, you stop proving and start embodying. Sometimes your best proof is not a loud comeback, but a quiet comeback. Not revenge, but reinvention. Not showing them, but showing you. That you're still here. That you're still becoming. That nothing they said could keep you from your purpose. That's power. When your inner world is solid, your outer world no longer shakes you. Criticism loses its sting. Praise loses its grip. You become unshakable, not because you're cold, but because you're centered. And that center was built by doing the work for you, not for them. There's a different kind of success that comes when your actions match your values. You feel whole, not hollow, fulfilled, not frantic. Because you're no longer chasing applause, you're chasing peace. And peace doesn't clap. It quietly nods and says, "You're on the right path. Keep going." The truth is, the world rarely claps at the right time. Sometimes they'll cheer for you when you're off track. Other times they'll ignore you when you're finally aligned. That's why their reaction can't be your measure. You're not here for applause. You're here for evolution. Every day you choose discipline over distraction, honesty over image, and growth over comfort. You're proving something, not to strangers, not to doubters, but to the version of you that used to question your own potential. That's the audience that matters. That's the one worth performing for. A quiet life full of self-trust is better than a loud one filled with self-betrayal. You can't buy peace. You can't fake presence. You earn both by becoming someone you're proud to meet in the mirror. That work is sacred. And it's worth doing, even if no one else understands it. So if no one claps, clap for yourself. If no one sees, you see. If no one believes, believe anyway. Because the moment you stop living for their reaction is the moment you finally become free. Free to build. Free to breathe, free to prove only to you. And when you do, everything changes, not because they finally see it, but because you finally feel it. You're no longer performing. You're no longer waiting. You're walking with quiet pride, deep purpose, and a kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Chapter 11. Show up even when you don't feel ready. Readiness is overrated. Most of the people who changed their lives weren't fully ready. They were simply willing. Willing to feel the fear and still move. willing to not have all the answers, yet still show up. If you wait until you feel ready, you may never begin. But if you show up, readiness starts to build itself within you. The future version of you is not created by comfort. It's formed in those moments where your heart races, your hands shake, and you do the thing anyway. The speech you give while stuttering, the workout you begin while doubting, the first step you take while still scared. These are not signs of weakness. They are the very signs of courage. A woman once walked into a job interview knowing she wasn't fully qualified. She showed up anyway, with honesty, presence, and an eagerness to learn. She didn't pretend. She didn't perform. She just offered her willingness. That willingness turned into a position that changed her life. Her readiness was built on the other side of the door. You'll rarely feel ready for the things that matter most. Why? Because they challenge your comfort zone. Growth doesn't feel like readiness. It feels like resistance. And showing up through that resistance is how you stretch. It's how you expand the edges of who you believe you are. The mistake is assuming you need to feel confident to act. But confidence is not a precondition. It's a byproduct. Every time you show up in doubt and still follow through, you're teaching your nervous system that uncertainty doesn't mean danger. That lesson repeated becomes confidence. When you don't feel ready, your mind fills in the gaps with fear. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? But those questions lose power in motion. The moment you step into the thing you're afraid of, reality speaks louder than worry. You begin to see that fear exaggerated everything, and you are more capable than you thought. Even the most successful people feel unready. They've just learned to move anyway. They've built a rhythm of showing up, not because they always believe, but because they've seen what happens when they move. Readiness is not their entry point, it's their reward. There's strength in not knowing and still participating, in entering the room without all the answers, but with your full self. You might fumble, you might fall, but you'll gain something others miss: experience. And experience, not preparation, is what matures you the most. A young man once walked onto a stage with notes still incomplete. He wanted to cancel, but he stepped up, spoke what he had, and listened to the room. What he learned in those 10 minutes couldn't have come from rehearsing another month. His imperfect showing up became a turning point. You do not become ready by waiting. You become ready by moving forward with what you have, by trusting that you'll figure it out along the way, that you'll build the wings while flying, that the future version of you is already taking shape as you take the next unsteady step. Every time you say, "I'll wait until I feel more ready," you train yourself to delay action. But when you say, "I'll show up now, even if I'm unsure," you train yourself to grow under pressure. That kind of self-trust doesn't just change outcomes, it changes identity. Sometimes the act of showing up is the most powerful declaration you can make, not for the world to see, but for you to witness. You chose movement over fear. You chose faith over waiting. And that small decision, repeated, becomes the soil from which your future is grown. Let go of the myth that you must have it all figured out before starting. Most people are building the path as they walk it. You don't see their invisible doubts. You don't hear their inner critic. But they're there. What separates them is not certainty. It's their willingness to move anyway. A musician once played their first live set with trembling hands. They forgot a chord, missed a line, but they kept going. The crowd didn't mind the stumbles. They remembered the bravery. That night wasn't polished, but it was real. And real is what people remember most. Don't underestimate the power of showing up while scared. That's where character is forged. That's where your inner voice learns to trust you. You begin to say to yourself, "Even when I don't feel ready, I show up. I try. I begin." That becomes part of your identity, and your strength. Readiness can become an excuse, a way to delay the discomfort of beginning. But beginnings are supposed to be messy. That's why they're called beginnings. You don't need clarity to begin. You need courage. The clarity will catch up as you keep walking. What you learn by showing up unready will serve you far longer than waiting for the perfect moment. You'll develop resilience, adaptability, self-respect. These traits don't come from comfort. They come from action, the kind you take even when doubt is in your ear. You may never feel fully qualified, equipped, or certain, but you can be present. You can be honest. You can be brave for one moment longer than your fear. And sometimes that's all it takes. One moment of bravery can carry you farther than 1,000 days of waiting. Even on your worst day, showing up still counts. It tells the world, and yourself, that your dreams matter enough to act, even when your energy is low, your confidence is shaken, or your path is unclear. You don't need to do it perfectly, you just need to be there. So next time you don't feel ready, go anyway. Speak anyway. Try anyway. Not because you're fully prepared, but because you're done waiting for perfect. Because your future depends not on how ready you feel, but on how deeply you're willing to begin. Every time you take action without feeling ready, you create proof that courage exists within you. That proof adds up. It becomes a quiet archive of every time you pushed forward, even when doubt told you to wait. And that archive becomes the foundation of your future confidence, not built on theory, but lived experience. Sometimes your most transformative moments will begin in discomfort. You'll feel out of place, unsure of your voice, and tempted to retreat. But if you stay just long enough to find your breath, you'll see something shift. The fear softens, the room doesn't feel so loud, and you realize you're capable of more than you believed. If you keep waiting to feel fully prepared, life will pass you by. There's always one more thing to learn, one more fear to overcome. But what you need most isn't more time, it's more trust. Trust that you'll adapt. Trust that you'll rise to meet the challenge, not because you're invincible, but because you're committed. The truth is, you'll never be fully ready for something that will change you. Growth demands that you walk into the unknown and meet yourself there. You're not supposed to know everything yet. You're supposed to discover it on the path. The path teaches what planning cannot. A woman once hesitated to share her story because she thought it wasn't polished enough. One day, she recorded a voice memo, unscripted, full of pauses. She shared it. People connected to her honesty, not her perfection. That one raw moment started a movement. She wasn't ready. She was real. You don't gain experience by reading or planning. You gain it by participating, even if you mess up, even if you fall short. Participation teaches you in ways comfort never could. So don't wait for readiness. Lean into the learning that only comes through action. Showing up when you're unsure teaches you something powerful. That fear doesn't define your limit. You feel it, acknowledge it, and move anyway. And in doing so, you shrink its power. You take back control, not by eliminating fear, but by walking past it. We admire those who seem fearless, but if you asked them, many would say they weren't fearless, just willing. Willing to speak up, willing to risk, willing to begin. What sets them apart is not their lack of fear, but their relationship to it. They treat it like background noise, not a stop sign. The voice that tells you you're not ready will always be there, especially before something meaningful. But what if you stopped waiting for that voice to disappear and started walking with it instead? What if you gave yourself permission to be both afraid and available for growth at the same time? One of the strongest things you can do is show up as you are, not as the polished version of who you think you should be. Authenticity will carry you where perfection cannot, because people respond to honesty, and more importantly, you respond to honesty. Your soul remembers when you're true to yourself. When you show up, you unlock possibilities that planning alone never could. Conversations unfold, new directions emerge, synchronicities appear. Life doesn't wait until you're ready, it waits until you're present. And presence only happens when you stop rehearsing and start engaging. Even when things go wrong, showing up gives you data. You find out what doesn't work, you learn your limits, you learn where to grow. But none of that learning happens if you stay stuck in your head, waiting for some imaginary green light. Movement is the teacher. Action is the mirror. You may be telling yourself, I'm not like them. But the truth is, they weren't ready either. They just got tired of waiting for the perfect moment. They chose to be available to the process. And in choosing, they changed their entire direction. That choice is always available to you too. Don't confuse stillness with wisdom. Sometimes stillness is just fear dressed up as strategy. Yes, some pauses are powerful, but too many pauses become paralysis. Eventually, the only wise thing left to do is begin. You won't always get it right. You'll trip over your words, you'll miss your mark. But the fact that you showed up when everything in you said not to, that's a victory. That's evidence of transformation. You're no longer ruled by readiness, you're led by resolve. Start before you understand the full picture. Show up with your questions, not just your answers. Be brave enough to look unsure. Be open enough to learn in real time. Readiness doesn't require perfection, only presence and willingness. The first time will always feel clumsy. That's normal. You're creating new wiring in your mind, new memory, new movement. That awkwardness isn't proof you don't belong. It's proof that you're expanding. And expansion always comes with a bit of chaos. Showing up while you're still learning allows you to grow publicly. It's raw, vulnerable, and real. But it's also where connection happens. People relate more to your process than your perfection. So let them see you show up, flaws and all. It gives them permission to try too. Sometimes just standing in the room, even if you're silent, is a revolution. Sometimes clicking send on an unfinished idea is a turning point. Sometimes lacing up your shoes is the hardest part of the run. Don't underestimate the power of entry. Everything else builds from there. So don't wait for the feeling of readiness to crown you. Instead, crown yourself through action. Step into the moment as you are, unprepared, uncertain, unfinished, and let the process do what preparation cannot. Because readiness is not a requirement. It's a result of your brave decision to begin. Chapter 12. Become the person who no longer waits. Waiting is a habit, one that disguises itself as caution, logic, or patience, but underneath, it's often fear in quiet clothing. The person who waits too long forgets they are not paused by the world. They are paused by their own hesitation. At some point, you must decide that your life cannot afford to be postponed anymore. There comes a moment when you realize no one is going to give you permission to start. That moment is sobering, but also freeing. You see that no external signal is coming. There is only you and a door that opens the second you stop waiting and begin walking. A woman once dreamed of starting her art business. She waited for more money, better equipment, more confidence. Then one day she picked up what she had and painted. She sold her first piece that month, not because conditions changed, but because she did. She stopped waiting and started moving. You can spend your whole life preparing and never arrive. There will always be more to learn, more to fix, more to fear. But growth doesn't reward endless preparation. It rewards bold commitment. You don't become the next version of yourself by wishing. You become it by stepping. The person who no longer waits lives in motion. They trust that clarity comes after action. They don't need guarantees. They just need to know that staying stuck is no longer acceptable. They've outgrown the safety of waiting and chosen the discomfort of becoming instead. We romanticize readiness. We treat it like a sacred feeling that will bless us one day. But in truth, readiness is created. It's earned in the furnace of trying, failing, learning. You won't feel it before you begin. You'll only feel it after you've proven to yourself that you can survive the process. Think about how many moments you've delayed, ideas you shelved, dreams you silenced. Now imagine what could have happened if you started then. That version of you still exists. They're not lost, just waiting for you to wake up and say, no more. I'm not waiting for the perfect time. I am the time. When you stop waiting, you begin showing up differently. You don't ask for permission. You don't look for signs. You listen inward. And when something feels true, you move. It's not about being impulsive. It's about being in tune with what can no longer be delayed. The person who no longer waits starts where they are, with the resources they have, with the courage they've got left. They stop waiting to be fearless and choose to act with the fear still in their hands. That version of you isn't louder. They're quieter, but far more certain. You don't have to know the whole path to take the first step. You don't need to master the outcome to begin the journey. That's the wisdom of those who stop waiting. They've learned that momentum matters more than mastery, and starting is the most important form of momentum there is. Someone once said, "Don't wait for the storm to pass. Learn to dance in the rain." But you can take that further. Don't just dance. Move forward. Create. Building. Begin. Let the storm be the reason, not the excuse. Those who stop waiting don't avoid challenge. They walk right through it. When you let go of waiting, you also let go of the illusion of control. You stop needing the whole plan and you start trusting your adaptability. Life rewards those who are in motion. Opportunities don't chase the hesitant. They align with the ones already moving. You'll know you've become the person who no longer waits when silence doesn't paralyze you, when uncertainty doesn't stop you, when you act because your values demand it, not because conditions approve it. That's when you begin to lead your own life. The old you needed permission. The becoming you does not. The old you feared what others might think. The becoming you fears what will happen if you stay silent. That's the shift. When staying where you are becomes more painful than risking who you're meant to be. Every small action, done today, not postponed, rewires your brain. You begin to trust yourself again. Trust that you won't abandon your goals, that you don't need a crisis to move, that you no longer wait for life to decide for you. You are the decision. Even one decision to stop waiting can create a ripple effect. You wake up earlier, you take that class, you write the email, you say the truth you've been holding back. It starts small, but it leads to a lifestyle. A life where initiative replaces indecision. Becoming this person means walking past the voices that say, "You're not ready." You hear them, sure, but you don't serve them. You serve your vision. You serve your growth. You serve the future that doesn't exist unless you create it with today's movement. No longer waiting doesn't mean rushing. It means acting without delay. You're still thoughtful, still intentional, but no longer frozen. There's a softness in this power. You move with grounded energy, with presence, with purpose. It's not chaotic, it's clear. When you stop waiting, your world opens. You see things you missed before, because now you're part of the flow. You're no longer just imagining, you're building, you're becoming. And every choice you make now reinforces the story. I act, I move, I don't wait. So become the person who no longer waits, not because the world is finally ready for you, but because you are finally done holding back. You are finally tired of the pause, the delay, the hesitation. Let that be your last excuse. From now on, you walk forward, ready or not. The habit of waiting convinces you that more time equals better results. But often, more time just creates more hesitation. Action creates clarity. Movement creates opportunity. It's not about rushing. It's about refusing to stay stuck in the illusion that delay somehow equals preparation. The only real preparation is motion. You can be unsure and still show up. You can be unqualified and still improve. You can be afraid and still begin. Waiting doesn't remove those feelings. It magnifies them. But when you move, you prove to yourself that those emotions don't own you. They're just passing visitors, not permanent residents. A man once said he'd wait until the new year to get healthy, but 3 years passed and nothing changed. Then one morning in the middle of a random week, he got up and walked a mile. That single mile didn't change his body. It changed his identity. He became the kind of person who acts without ceremony. You don't need a dramatic moment to begin. You don't need to hit rock bottom or have a sudden epiphany. You just need to choose. Choose to stop abandoning yourself every time fear whispers, "Not yet." There is power in the decision made in silence. It often carries more impact than the one shouted aloud. The longer you wait, the more momentum you give to inaction. It becomes your default setting. But the moment you decide to shift, even with the smallest step, you begin carving a new pattern into your days. That one act of motion becomes a new truth. I move even when I don't feel like it. You stop waiting when you realize no one is coming to save you. That's not a sad thought. It's a liberating one, because now you know the door opens from the inside. You hold the key, and every day you choose to step through it, you're reminding yourself, I am my own rescue. The person who no longer waits doesn't need a crowd. They don't need everyone's support. They've learned to move with or without applause. They know the real applause comes from within. When they look back and realize they kept going, even when no one was watching. Somewhere along the line, we started believing we need to be ready in every way to begin. But life doesn't work like that. Some of the most beautiful journeys begin with nothing but faith and movement. You figure out the rest as you go. Readiness is created through the act of showing up, not the other way around. It's easy to wait when things are uncertain. But the truth is, everything meaningful exists on the other side of uncertainty. Love, growth, purpose. None of it comes with a guarantee. And that's okay, because your courage doesn't need certainty to begin. It just needs your decision. The world has taught you to wait. Wait for approval, wait for timing, wait for confidence. But all of that lives inside you already, buried under layers of doubt. When you stop waiting, you begin uncovering what was never missing, just unused. You realize you were the answer all along. A quiet revolution happens when you act without validation, when you write the book, apply for the job, end the relationship, start the thing. Not because someone told you to, but because you finally decided that your future was worth acting for. That kind of self-led motion reshapes everything. You become magnetic when you no longer wait. Opportunities find you. People take notice. But by then, it doesn't matter, because you didn't do it for attention. You did it to honor your growth. You did it because stillness no longer felt like peace. It felt like delay. There's a stillness that calms, and a stillness that suffocates. Learn the difference. If your silence is rooted in reflection, it has value. But if it's rooted in fear, it becomes a trap. When you stop waiting, you learn to distinguish between rest and avoidance. And that wisdom leads to real momentum. When you stop waiting, your inner dialogue changes. You stop saying, maybe someday. You start saying, why not now? That shift in language reshapes your energy. You begin walking into rooms differently, not with ego, but with quiet ownership. You're no longer trying to convince yourself. You've already decided. You'll never feel like the timing is perfect. The conditions rarely align the way you hope. But what you do have is this moment, full of potential, full of choice. And if you can act now in uncertainty, you build something stronger than success. You build self-trust. Those who wait often dream big but die with regret, not because they lacked ambition, but because they lacked movement. Don't let your potential become a memory. Let it become momentum. Use what you have, move where you are, and trust that showing up is the only real requirement. You may stumble when you begin. You may question yourself. That's part of it. But even in the stumble, you're further ahead than you were when you stood still. Every step teaches you something about yourself, your strength, your direction. Waiting teaches you nothing. Movement teaches everything. You don't owe your old self the loyalty of delay. You owe your future self the gift of action. The one who's waiting for you to begin isn't out there. They're inside you, stronger, clearer, wiser, and they're building themselves through every brave decision you make today. At some point, you must stop circling your potential and step into it, not by being fearless, but by being honest. I've waited long enough. That sentence is a doorway, and once you step through, you don't just become the person who moves, you become the person who creates. So become the person who no longer waits, not because life is easy, not because the fear is gone, but because something greater is calling you. Something beyond the doubt, beyond the hesitation, and it will only meet you on the road. Start walking. You're already becoming. The version of you that you admire, they are not a fantasy. They are a future grounded in the actions you choose today. Every small act of courage, every disciplined choice, is building the bridge between who you are and who you are becoming. You will not always feel certain. You will not always feel bold. But becoming isn't about feeling ready. It's about moving anyway. Again and again, quietly, deliberately, unshakably. You don't need to wait for life to give you a sign. You are the sign. So walk forward, not because you're already that person, but because you've finally decided you're done waiting. And that decision changes everything.